Hello. This week's application is about a utility facade. As I have previously announced, we have an assembly which has 11 parts in this one. We have look to the parts, the first one we have the base part. Also, we have the spout part, handle, lock ring, and the other things that we have in the assembly parts. We will just first start making the parts. Then we will just combine the parts. Then we are going to make the technical drawing of the assembly parts and also the part drawings. Let's start. In the assembly part, we have the first part here, which we have the base part at this point. We are just going to start with this one. In the technical drawing side of the base, which we have the second page, the third page of the base faucet. From this point, I will just zoom in and try to make this part. We have a cross-sectional part here. Also, we have a top view. As you see, our part have a dimension, and we will just start to just create the body part, and I will add the other items. Also, I will sometimes remove these portions from the part drawing. Okay, let's start. First thing, I'm going to open the new part. Since our templates are metric in size, I will just go to U and you see I will just enlarge this one. I'm going to use the metric template with the standard millimetric. Then hit the create button. The first thing in the drawing side, I will just make and choose a point for myself as an origin point. I will select this point, or you can select this point, or you can select this point, which are in the symmetrical side of these parts. I will select this point and I will just create the body part, which is on the bottom side. I will just first create the body part here. I will just then add the upper part with revolve units. In this part, I will just open the center point visibilities to see where I am. Also, I will just stick some items to this point. I will just open the visibility of XY plane to sketch it on. I will just start from the basic sketch, which you can see at this point. I will just draw this outline and I will just make the extrusion with 25 millimeters. Let's start this one. Start this first sketch. I will just go to this view. You can also use this box view to just switch and to see where you are. First, select this one. The first thing in the sketch environment, we should have to just draw the lines here, axis lines. For this reason, I will just start the first line with escape, second line. I'm not going to use these lines on the sketch view. I will just select by pressing the control button, or I will just select all the things here by having the left click on or left click on the other side and convert these lines to the construction mode. The next thing, I will just stick the midpoints of these lines to the origin point. I will just have this one and make it this stick to. Then this one, the other line, I will do the same thing. Also, I have two lines here. I have two lines, which are these two lines. I will just draw these two lines in order to have the representation. This is the line for the left side, axis line. This is the line for the right side. And also I will just convert these lines to construction. For the property here, we have a symmetric condition. And this symmetric condition is about 102 millimeters around the origin line. For this reason, I'll just first define the constraint from this one with the symmetric. I have the symmetric condition. I will just make this line and the other line symmetrical around the line at the midpoint. Then I will just define the dimensional constraint for my figure. I will just define that figure. We have 102 millimeters in all directions. To see the first sketch, I will just zoom with an all option, which is on the right side of our 3D screen, 3D window. If you want to have the midpoint constraint to these lines will just occur with the dimensions also. As you see, we have, it is not, I cannot manage this one. I will just again give the symmetric condition around these lines. Then I will do the same second thing. I will just define the figure here, which I have seen. I'm just going to make the blue outline here. This blue outline, the slot part. First this one and the second one. And I will just make it two lines onto it. Also the second line on the bottom side. And make tangents condition with these two lines to each line. Make the trims for the unnecessary parts. I will get the trim condition, make these lines to be trimmed. The diameter or the radius here have this side, as you see, we have the condition 22.5 millimeter in radius. We first create the bottom side here. We will just create the base part. I will just finish my sketch and have the extrude and select this face. Here I have the dimension for 25 millimeter in size. I will just erase this dimension and give it 25 millimeters. Just create the first thing. As you see, we have in the technical drawing, it is defined. Here we have the thickness around 1 point wall thickness 1.8 millimeters. For this reason, you can do two things. You can just create another extrusion with the 1.8 millimeters smaller than the outer size, or you can just define a new command which is called shell to make the part here to be on the to be empty. And by this selection, the remove faces selection, which you have in the command, it is waiting for your selection. You can just make this one and select the face to make that feature as an empty feature here. And from the thickness selection, you can just select 1.8 millimeter inside. Let's create this one first. The other side, we also have some holes here. Their diameter here we have the 25 millimeters. This one. For this reason, I will just create a new sketch by using the first top face of this body, and I will just get the geometries from the outer side and get this point again for the other side, get the geometry here and make the equality condition with these two circles. As you see, we just get created some project geometries according to our selections. And this time it is attached to this view. For these two circles, we will just define which is the 25 millimeter dimension. For this one, I will just finish my sketch, have the extrusion tool, and select these two items. Change the Boolean operator to cut and make the true all cut in order not to have a dimension on the technical drawing side. I will just approve this one. The other sides we have, I'm just going to zoom my part. For the part here, we have a revolve section at this point. I'm just going to add the same thing on this part. For this reason, I will just first make the part here is as an empty face, but I will just leave as it is, then I will remove that section. For this reason, I will just create a sketch to be revolved on. For this reason, I'm just going to open a new plane to sketch on. Make this with this XZ plane visible and start a new sketch with right click, or you can just make a new sketch, start a new sketch on XZ plane. With the F7 tool, you can have the sectional cut view, which you have this one. I will just show it again. With F7 tool, you see, and you will just erase everything between your point of view and the place you are starting on. Yeah, you are working on. I'm sorry. For this reason, I'm just going to make the revolve section here, like this, two pieces. I'm just going to make this section. The outer circle here and the bigger circle on the other side have the dimensions 31, 32 and 38 millimeter with the height which is 25 45 minus 25 which is 20 millimeter stock at this point. This dimension is 20 millimeter. I will just start draw this line. First, I need a line for axis line because I will just use that revolve section And I'm not going to use this line. I will just convert it to construction. I will just make the line starting from the bottom side of this circle. I will just make this one and make the profile something like this. I will just keep my point, this line on this point, this line again on this line. I will just make the parallel constraint, and here I have 1.8 millimeter in conversion. But before this one, I would just like to give another property to the line on the symmetry axis. Here I will just define this axis line as a symmetry center line property in order to give the dimensional constraints in the technical drawing side, which I have seen the diameter information. From this point, I will just define first this circle, this line as a center line, and give the dimension from the top to this line and define as 32. And for the bottom side, I will do the same thing, which is 38. And the height from the top side of this one, which I have seen here, it is 20 millimeter, and I will just change this dimension 1.8. As you see, we have the outline, but we will just make this part empty as we see in the technical drawing side. We will just make another cut at this point. For this reason, I will just get the geometry with the project geometry, which is on the top surface of this body part. Also, I will just create a small line for the cut operation in the figure here. And I will just add another line at this point, which is this one. Our section is ready for revolve section. Finish this sketch. Have the revolve tool on this one. I will just select this profile to be turned around this line. To use that sketch, because it is not empty this part, I will just make another cut with a revolve part. For this reason, I'm not going to draw a new sketch at this point. I will just make this sketch visible, have the view, see better. I get the half section view and select the exact plane with approve to see, to show you what I'm doing during the revolve section. In the 3D model, I will just go to back to 3D model. I have revolve, select the revolve. This time, I will just select this internal area and select the axis. But this time, I'm not going to join this section. I will just make the cut this section and create with OK. I will just close the visibility of this sketch, and I will just have the get out from the half section view with end section view. I will just save my a new folder. This one, the base part. Double click on this, the part one with Faucet base. We have some reinforcement inside of our part, like this. These two parts we have C, and these are located 19 millimeters far from the center line of this one, and their thickness are 1 millimeters. For this, you can just create a new sketch in this field by opening a new sketch on this plane. With F7 tool, we will just remove the material between our point of view and this side. I will just, in order to get the axis midpoint, I will just create a project geometry. I will select the top face, this circle here to create a line projection, and I will just define a rectangle in order to represent the reinforcement in the base part, in our base part, like this. I will just make these with a rectangle. You can make also the second one on the other side, but I will just show you one possibility to for the other side. We can just mirror that sketch or that feature to the other side by using the planes. I will just make coincident. I will just get the coincident constraint, this point on this line, and I will just create a dimensional constraint. For this, to get the axis at this point, I will just get the midpoint of this line. I will just create, I will turn it to construction. These all are in construction except this rectangle at this point. We have a 90 millimeter distance from these two parts, and the thickness of this reinforcement is 1 millimeter. You can also create the mirror on the other side, but I would like to just make this part as it is. The dimension of the part height here is 12.7 millimeters. This one. I will just turn this. Have the 12.7 millimeter in height. Finish my sketch first. See, to show you what I'm doing is, I will just turn my point of view from the box on the other side. I have the sketch. I will just make the extrusions by selecting the two command. I will first extrude this face, this one. To use that sketch again, I will just use another extrusion. This time I will change, or I will just select the two command. I will just make the other side selected and make this extrusion to the other side. For the space, I will just close the visibility of the sketch, and I will just get another copy on the other side. For this reason, I'm going to use another plane, which is on our part midpoint, the symmetry axis. I will just make the selection this time, pattern selection with the mirror command. I will just select mirror and then select the features, which is this one. I'm sorry. Also, another feature, again, which is this one. I'll select the two by pressing the control button, select the mirror plane on the other side, and just create another wall on the other side. You can also just create the other sides. For here, I'm, the part is almost finished, but I'm just going to make the fillets at this point. We have the fillets for all fillets 1.5 millimeter in our part. From this one, I will just close the visibility of lanes. Save my part. This warning can be, you can have this warning. This is a warning. It has a inclination mark. Here we have, it says that we have a view base at this point, view folder. We cannot make this view with this half section view, which we had did that before. You can also save your part view, this view, with a new button with right click on the view master. And we can just make this view, which I will just rename it half section. You can switch the master view and the half section by double clicking on them. This is a very useful command in the part drawing, in the part modeling side. You can just save the part. If you are going to use many times, you should have to just switch those selections. For the fillet part, here I will just select the fillet command. At this point, I will just get all fillets, but first I'm going to change with 1.5 millimeters, select all the fillets. This time, what the figure sees will just be all the filleted as you see in the drawing. Hit OK. We have the filleted model inside. Also, I will just add other fillets also for inside fillets. These inside fillets are all done on the outside fillets, not automatically done. We have added those features. I will just select this part and finish this part. We have made the first part at this point with the base face, faucet base. I will just concentrate this time on the faucet spots part here. The spot part is just a sweep part. In the sweep parts, we have just defined a pathway and a profile at this point, which is a circular item here. We have a donut shape, and we will just sweep that profile on the line here. But first, before this one, I will just like to have. I will just clean this one. I would like to have divide this part into three sections. The first thing, I will just make this by this part as a revolve part, then the other part again a revolve. I will just combine the rest of the parts here. I will just make the sweep around this part. I will just again just go on this one. I will just combine these two blue sections with the sweep command. First, I need the sketch. Let's start. Again, a new part. From the metric template, I will just go for standard millimetric. Again, to choose this one, I will just select the visibility and open the visibility of the center point and have the XY plane visibility to see where I am at this point. Let's start the sketch. First of all, the profile or the path of the spot. For this reason, I will just make the line starting point and I will just select my part point as this point, origin point. I will just make the lines here. I need two center lines, which is this curvature and which is this curvature needs to have. Again, I start with a line starting from this point. Just go for it. Then another line for it. The curvatures, these two curvatures here have different radiuses here. Also, we would like to, you can also create the other curvatures, but I would like to just make the fillets between these two items and the other two items, and I will just define the axis points according to the origin point or there itself. Okay, let's start. I will just have the first fillet command and select change the dimension to 32, which is this one, this point, this line, enter. Again the fillet, this line and this line, I will just create this one. But before this one, I will just extend the dimensions and stretch with the mouse left click and select the points here. Again the fillet to make a good connection. As you see, our dimension here, it is just here represented. You can also create the circle command. With the circle command, you can create these 32 millimeter radiuses and 25.4 millimeters, which is 1 inch in dimension. You can just create these dimensions. From this point, I will just erase this line and I will just define the 52 millimeter and 32 millimeter for this axis line. This is also an axis. I will just give the dimension from this line to this line, which is 32. And again, I'm sorry, double click on this one. This point to this line, the distance here, which is 57. I will just define the other axis, the other fillet size from this point, but first I will change the dimension here, 25.4. I will just extend this line and give the dimension between these two lines, which is 90 millimeter here, 90 millimeter. Also, the height is 42.5 millimeter. The dimension, I will just select the point, 2 points, just move my mouse to get the dimension here, which is 42.5. You can also just create the dimensions here. I will just keep this line long as much as possible. This is our pathway. Finish this one. Again, I will just look for this piece here and I will just create a new sketch for the bottom section here. I will just create another line here. I will just create a revolve profile which I have seen at this point. From this one, this is my origin point as I have told before. This is my origin point. I will just create the half of this section because it is a revolved section. I will just draw one side, this side or this side. It is up to you. I will just draw this side. These also have some dimensions on it. I will just create that sketch here. I will just create a new sketch and start from the bottom point. I will just get a reference geometry with a construction line here. I will just get a project geometry and close the visibility of that sketch and turn this piece as a construction line. Also, I will just drop another line here and convert it to center line in order to define the 20 millimeter sweep profile length dimension. For this one, I will just first create a new line starting from this point. This is the profile which I have inside. Also, I will just make another circle here and I will just combine the two lines here. Or I will just stick to this one, something like this, and make the trims in order not to have the other side. What I did is, I will just show you here. I will just draw the inside profile of this up to somewhere here. It is not important. After this point, we will just continue to the sweep profile by using the dimensions. We have a wall thickness, profile wall thickness at this point, which is 1.5 the radiuses are 1.5 millimeters. I will just create an offset profile by selecting these two, make this one. Then I will just make a close ends in order to use this profile for revolve process. Then I will just define the dimensional constraints. From this point to this point, I have 9.5 millimeters. From the outside diameter from this point to this point, I'm sorry, please be careful, select the right click and select the other line which we have just lastly created. And the dimension here, it is 1.5 millimeters. Also, we have a dimensional constraint, this point, the inside here. I will change the dimension type to diameter, which is 3 millimeters. And the top side, I have, as you know, we have created these profile. It is not fixed, but I know these two lines are following each other. For this, I will just use the collinear constraint to make these lines aligned. The next thing, we will have a tangent condition here at this point. You can have the midpoint of this circle on the one of these lines. Make the coincident this point on this line. As I have told you before, the length here is not important. We will just divide as we wish to have these two profiles. This is the profile which we have created. I will finish my sketch, have the revolve tool, and if I have a closed profile and have a rotation axis defined as center line, the inventor just gets the all profile here. Also, I have slits on the outside which are 1.5 millimeters. So you better what I will just get the from the view tab, half section view, and make this half section okay. To show you better, I will just zoom on it and I will have the profile which you have seen in the technical drawing site. Thing, just continue to sweep commands to this point. For this, I need the visibility of the sketch. Geometries around the line. Okay, I will just first the half section, or I can just make save the half section view by right clicking the view with the new command and make this view as half section. Just switch this time to okay. I will just start to sketch for the path profile. I will just get the geometries. This line, this line, this line, this line, and this line for the path profile. I will just close the first sketch which I have did to keep the last I have did. The next thing, I will just create the other profile, other section which you have seen in the D detail here. I'm going to make another sketch, revolve sketch, after this profiles section. Again, I will just create a new sketch. I will just define this profile. I will just draw this profile on this section on this plane. Again, a line here. As you know, we have a dimensional constraint of this line end, which is 32 millimeter far from here. We just keep this line horizontal and keep that line dimension from the center point on. I will just get the perfect geometry. Get the- I will just close the profile. I will get the diameter dimension from here for this line end. And it is 32. I will also get another constraint which is this line projection. I'll just make the line point coincident on this line. I will just close the first page visibility. I will just make the profile which I have seen here like this. I will just follow these steps like this. I will just start the line here, this line, this line, this line. Just go up to this point. I can. I'm not free as on the other side. These I have a limited size here. Also, I will just go inside. And I will have a full thickness this point to this point, 1.5 millimeter. I will just make the trim for unnecessary parts, and I will just give the dimension. For this line, I will just turn it to construction, create a new line, and make this line a center line to give the dimension in constraint. Here I have 11 dimension thickness here in inches. Threaded connection at this point, which is 11 divided by 16, this time in inches. And I will just define the other lengths here, which is 9.5 millimeter at this point. This step at this point is 9.5 millimeter, 6.5 millimeter at this point, and 25. Again, right click, select the other curve, 25 millimeter, and I'll just keep this line with the 20 millimeter, and I will just make this cut, make the trim, and leave as it is not fixed. So, sketch as a tool. I'll just make the full revolve at this. From this point, what I'm going to do is I have the sketch profile here. So I will just start a new profile. For this one, it is the same thing for us. Okay, start a new sketch on this face. Let the geometry sweep. I will just get edge, edge, sketch, and this time sweep command. First, I have the profile. This is the profile selection. Also, the path profile, which I have seen here. As you see, these two sketches, I'm sorry, the profile is not very precisely. It is just following the two profiles here. I will just cancel this one. I will only get the geometry that I need. I have again switch, swipe plane, turn to front face. I'll get the project geometry, this line, this curvature, and I will just get the starting and end line of these two items. So I made a mistake at this point. I'm just going to correct it. And this time I have this line, this side here is 1.5. We have a very thin side. For this thin side, I will just make another step at this point, which is starting from 9.5 millimeters, and I will just connect this one and make the trims for unnecessary parts. For this, I will connect two parts. Train having I have the thickness at this point, which is 2 millimeters, which you have seen here, which you have seen here. It is 2 millimeters. My sketch, the revolve tool. This time it is corrected on the top side. Again, I will just close the sketch visibility. We also turn back to, we have a profile at this point. At this point, I will just close the other profile sections. We have the lines starting from these points. We will make these points, that's all. Also, from this point, I will just go to the profile section, the sketch, F7 tool, these all lines. I'm not going to use these lines to convert the lines here for construction. This line and this line geometry, and I will just connect the two lines, which is this line, and it will end up to this point. For this reason, I will just trim this one, this line, also another line at this point, and I will just make another trim at this point. Finish my sketch. Add the sweep command. Again, take the profile here, which I have previously created, and select this profile to connect these 2 points to each other. Okay. Also, we can omit the revolve part on the top side because it is not going to just show the neck at that point. I can just omit this section. Make this line on this point by removing that point. Save your part file. This is the part file, which is the second one, the faucet, the spot. This is for the second part.
Hello, we will continue making the utility faucet. We have made the two parts, the part base and the spout part. Then we have the handle part, which is the part number 3. Again, I will just define what I'm going to do, and I will just create the part here. First of all, we need a deep sketch in this view. This is the front view. This is the top view on the top side. Also, we have a cross section, which is the EE1 here. I will just make the first the sketch outlet, but one by one. First of all, I will just make the body part at this point with the revolve feature. Then I will just make this extension, but for this extension I will just create the two surfaces which is which has a slope at this point. Then I will just make the inside closure. I will again make this one, and then I will just create the feeders at these points which make the material much more stiff than the previous side. For this reason, I will just make the first the sketch of this one, because I'm going to use most of this sketch at this point. Let's open a new part, and I will just select the point here as this point, which is this one, the basic point, which is this one, also which is this one, as the origin point for myself. I have opened the origin side, have the center point visible, have the XY plane visible. Start the new sketch on XY plane. First of all, I will just create the axes, or one axis at this time, it is possible. But you can also make, for the dimensional purposes, you can just create two axis lines. Or you can just make the axis lines beside at this point and move the midpoints by having the midpoint constraint at this point, make them stick on this origin point. I will just convert these lines to construction because I'm not going to use this one. I will just make the zoom much more to show you the better view. First, I will just create the body part and the other lines as well. For this base part, I need to sketch something like this. Also, I will need the inside part closure at this point. We can just create every sketch, the old sketches in this view. I'm just starting with a line feature, and from this line I will just go to right way, then I will just go to downside. Also, I will just give the center line property for this axis line in order to have the dimensions in diameter form like this. Then the sketch at this point here I have, I'm sorry, the bottom line of this profile. I will just make the closure at this point. The bottom side has the diameter, which is again 33.5 millimeter in diameter. The top side has the 30 millimeter diameter. I will just use the point at this point and have the center line to give the diameter. The height from this line to the bottom line, we have 36.5 millimeters. Also, we just continue to the straight side and also perpendicular line, and we will just attach that line, which is the profile that we have inside here. This is the line that we are going to deal with it. will just go to the top side. I will just delete. The line here has 10 millimeter. The bottom line, the back line, I will just make the trim to get that point dimension, and I will just give that dimension, which is 15 millimeters. From the center point, this extension has 46 millimeters. But if I use this dimension with this line, I will get the dimension at the diameter of this point. For this, I will just use the origin line here, origin point, to give that dimension, which is 46. This is the body part, first of all. If you want, you can also create the inside features at this point. These creatures here, these items, I'm sorry. The inside hole, this point, the other side, this point, also the other way, this point. I will just create one by one. And most of their dimensions are given at this cross-sectional view. Please make this view in mind, and we will just use the both two things about this feature. We will just use this two cross sections at this point. This is the partial cross section, which is not defined very much, and we will just use these dimensions. Again, I will just create the profile which I have seen. I have a seating at this point. This line, I will just continue. Again, another one. For this, I will just go back and just go to the top side with escape and trim for the other lines. The top side has 13 millimeter. This is the dimension here on the 13 millimeter, then 9.5 millimeter. Then we have the 7 millimeter diameter, which is this one. It is the same in alignment. Also, this side we have 11.5 millimeter. Let's give the dimensions first. This one. Do not forget to use the center line at this point to have the dimensions. This side it is 13 millimeter. This side it is 9.5. Also, we have another step at this point. It is 4 millimeter. Also, I have omitted this one. We have another profile here. Make the trims. And I will just combine this line with two other items. I will extend this line and this line and make the trims for unnecessary parts. Again, I will just define the 9.5 millimeter. Then after we have 7 millimeter. We have also 4 millimeter at this point. We will just continue to this point. I will extend that one. I will just make the trims for unnecessary parts. Also make the trim. But when we trim, I have lost the dimension. I will again satisfy that dimension, which is 7 millimeters. and make these two lines follow each other by the collinear constraint. The outside diameter, it is 11.5 millimeters. And I will just make the trims which I do not need so. Then we will just give the dimensions, sorry, the dimensions which we have in length. I will just turn these dimensions like I see and the technical drawings are. I will just give the from the top side to the bottom side, which is 28.5 millimeters. I have this seating with 1.5 millimeters, which is this one. Again, 4.5 millimeter, 4.9 millimeters. From the top side, I have 16 millimeter. I have point here, which is 5 millimeters. I will just define everything that I need for the basic views, basic object to create on. Also, we have at this time the wall thickness values here, which is implied in the technical drawing, which is 1.8. We will just use that later on. I have finished my sketch, first of all. For the first thing, I will just revolve and create the body part around this axis line. To use that sketch, I'm going to make that visible again, and for the extension part, I will need something more here. The lines or the surfaces. We cannot make a normal extrusion process because it has different dimensions in this point and at this point. For this reason, I need a sketch on the top side. For that reason, I'm going to just draw another sketch, and I will just make two surfaces and make this extension to be extruded to those surfaces. I will just choose the top face, just close the sketch visibility to work clearly, start a new sketch to show you which face we will just draw on. We have the first sketch on this point. Again, from the front view sketch, I need some items because the faucet will just go up to this point, which is this point. You can just see in the inventor side, this point. For this, I need the geometry at that point. I will just select this line or this point. I'm just going to select the line to have the point and make the sketch visible to invisible again to work clearly. I will just go up and just create a line and make that line midpoint on this point which I have recently created. I will just choose this point. I will just make this point midpoint, select with right click, select others with the point on that section. And this section has a symmetry because we have just stick that to in the midpoint line, and it is 13 millimeters. And this extension will just go to up to this point. with something like this. Also, we have another millimeter, another line on the other side. I will just create that line. But before this, I will just make a line for mirroring purposes. I will just use another line with construction because I'm not going to use this line. I will have the mirror command to make the copy of line around somewhere here by using this line. Have the mirror command, select the face, I will just select the mirror line, apply, and done to have the outline. As you see, in the technical drawing, we have, I'm just going to use, we have 16 millimeter, but this 16 millimeter is on the back side of this surface, something like this. For that reason, I will just create a project geometry and have this view, have this edge, which edge I'm going to show in detail. Here I'm going to just get a project geometry from the bottom side of this face. And I will just go to top side, make the trims to get the points which I'm going to give their dimensions, which are 16 millimeters. For this reason, I will just give the dimension tool by selecting the point. I will have the dimension tool, select this point, then select the other point, have this connection with 16 millimeters. We have again defined a symmetry condition around this line, although it is defined with the mirror of these, but as you see, it is not fully defined at this lineup because we have just made the trim process. For this, I'm again use a symmetry condition. This symmetry condition, I will just define the points. Please just select the point, select the other point, then select the line to define this. Then we will just make the 16 millimeter dimensional constraint, and I will just make two lines or two items, which is this project geometry and this line as construction, because I'm not going to use those lines. I will just create the surfaces by using this line and this line and finish that sketch first of all. I will just create an extrude. This time I'm not going to use the solid model. I will just switch this one to surface model and just select one surface with the true all option, which will create a surface up to this point. I will just make this one. Also, I will just create this one. I will just create a normal surface, but this time on the other side. Let's give 100 millimeter in length. We will just use this one. I will just show the visibility, close the visibility of XY plane, which we have created from the top side, which is the surface at this point we have created. Also, I need another surface at this point. I will get the mirror of this one by using the XY plane. Again, I have the visibility on and make the mirror. This time I will just copy the surface which I'm previously created at this height. I have the mirror plane, and this time I am going to use the XY plane. have this one for the extrusion side. I will just close the visibility on this point to work clearly. Now I have two surfaces which are representing the surfaces I have seen from the top side. Now I'm going to make the extrusion in this view. For this, I'm going to use the first sketch which I have previously created. Make this sketch, the first sketch, visible. I will just make an extrusion, this time one by one. One for this selection, but I'm going to make a selection, extrusion, by selecting the two commands and selecting this face with OK. Also, another extrusion, again same profile. This time I will just make a join operation to the other side by selecting again the two command. This time I'm just selecting the surface on the back side. These are added to our figure. Okay. As you see, we have just made these sections with the extrusion side. I will just close the visibility of the surfaces because we have done almost everything here. Also, I will just go to, from this surface models, I can just, from the top side, I can just close the visibility of the surfaces and have saved the part file. This is the part file, which is the part hand minus handle. I'm just going to close sketch visibility and to check what I have done here. Okay. The next thing, we have a wall thickness around all the part here. Wall thickness with 1.8 millimeters. For this reason, we will just use the same manner or the same logic which we have done on the faucet base. We use the shell command to have a wall thickness on all sides of the faces. I choose the shell command. I will remove this face, also this face, because as you see, we have no part here. We have no part here. It is completely empty. And I will just make the thickness at this point, which is 1.8 millimeters. Select two faces, which are the bottom sides of these two surfaces. We will just make these two empty parts. Okay. To have the half section, I will just go to the view menu, have the end selection. I will just choose the half section view, go to XY plane to have the half view section here. When we use the base command, we have a fault at this point. The body is not continuing at this point for this reason, but we, in the technical drawing, we have that section. I will just clean that. We have a full at that section. For this reason, I will just make the healing at this point, and I will just make the revolve process by using this side again. For this reason, I need a new sketch on XY plane. Make the sketch XY plane visible to see better. Start a new sketch on XY plane. For this, I need the geometry to stick on these parts. I will use these two lines to draw and heal that section with the revolve process. For this reason, also I need a rotation axis in this revolve section. I will just continue and make the close section at this point. I will just draw two lines starting from the 2 points and select the top side with this line. We will just create a closed loop area to use in the revolve process. Just make escape to get out of the project geometry. I will make the follow these two lines to these features, these lines. For this, I will use the collinear constraint, this line to this line, escape. This time, again have the collinear constraint, this line to follow each other. And this time, I will just make the trims. Now I have a closed loop area. For this reason, I will just make the construction lines, convert these lines to construction, also this one to construction. Now we have the healing section at this point. Finish my sketch. Have the revolve process. Select this time. Select the axis which we have drawn here. If you haven't drawn, go back to sketch and just draw a line at this origin point. Make this one and make healing at this point. If you want, as you see, we have an empty part here. For this one, we need to just extend that sketch with I have just created a new line. Its dimension is not important. Make the trims by using these lines and make these lines extended, or make another profile to heal that section again. I'm not going to use these newly created projection geometries. I will just follow these two lines to this line again with the construction. So this line follow this line. You can make this line parallel to this line by the selection. Finish your sketch. Have the revolve tool. This time, select the lower profile also to heal that sketch again. Save your part. This time, we haven't saved the half section view. For this, we open a new view and name this one half section if you want so. Oh, let's say for the top side, we will just make the extrusions, but for this, we have to first fill this section at this point. Again, I need to open the visibility of the sketch, first sketch. For this, I will just fill this area with the revolve tool. I will select this area and this area, and by this selection, I will just fill this area. Also, I will just make another revolve cut at this point. This time I'm not going to join. I will just make the cut, select the axis to revolve at this point. I will just make the visibility of the sketch and save this file.
Okay, we just created the inside feature here. Also, we only need these profiles to be stick on our part. From the top side, top view, we have four reinforcement at these points. From the top side we see, but from the side view or the front view, we have a part something like this. For this reason, we will just create a new sketch, whether from the top side or we can also create from the side view. From the top side with 15 millimeters from the bottom side, 15 millimeter from the top side. I have just started a new sketch. Choose the XY plane. I will just use the geometry which I have in hand at this point. F7. I will just have the projection geometry. As you see, we have this line. I will just combine the also select the other geometry from this top side. I will just get this line and I will just create only one line here. We are not going to use this one or that one. It's up to you. We will just go inside to this point. We can also use the outside lines here. I will just ignore the lines and delete inside. I will use the line profile. Or it is, I think it's better to make this one somewhere from the top side or from the bottom side. I will just create four sketches from the bottom side and I will extrude up to the other point here. Let's make this one. I will just change my view to master side. I will start a sketch, but this time I will just start the sketch below 15 millimeter from the top side. For this reason, I need a new plane to sketch on. I will just create a new plane from the top side. I will just close the visibility of this plane, just choose the plane command, and I will just choose offset from a plane, and I will use the top surface of this handle, and I will just move that plane in but on the other side. I will create a new sketch from that point. Start a new sketch. I will just go to the bottom view like this. Start a new sketch on this work plane. The F7 tool and time, not project geometry, project cut edges. To get these intersection surfaces. Okay. From this point, I'm not going to use this line. I will just make this one construction and I will just make one surface with a line on one rectangle with a line, a symmetric on just convert this line and make this line. This line is just starting from the origin point. I have a symmetric condition. This line, and this line are symmetrical around. Also, I will just start somewhere inside of our profile, and from the top side, as you see drawing here, we have 2 millimeter in thickness. I will just define this dimension meter, and I will just make this one. I'm not part, but I will just right size inside of our figure like this. Okay. Then I will just finish my sketch, have the extrusion tool, select this profile, and I will just make this time to next profile, which it will hit the back face or the top face up to this point, somewhere here. Let's create this first, then check the half sectional view. I will just check the half sectional view here. I will just create the half section, which is this one. I will just fill the view inside like this. I will just make this one in green color, which areas I have just filled in. For this, we have the four reinforcement at these points. I have just only made this one. For this reason, I will just go for it and I will just make the copies circular pattern command around this axis line. I have the circular command pattern. I will just go to extrusion because I'm going to make the copies around. And I will just select the rotation axis. This one, and this one, or this one. You can select any of the items which are related to. I have copies, but my copies will be in for change the placement on this one or copy around. Okay. And save your part file. Then I'm going to make a new fillet tool. Again, the fillets, as you see in the paint drawing, I have 1.5 millimeter long fillet. Try change the fillets on the top side. Also, let's check the first profile. Change to our master view. We have missing on the front side. Let's make this one. Then this one, 1.5 millimeters in diameter. As you see, we have just made the fillets all around here. So far, we have just made the parts at this point. Save your part file, and we are just going to make the next part at this point. Okay, we will just continue with the part 4 with the lock nut. It's a simple part, and we just only define a revolve process. We are not going to deal with the knurling at this point. We will just make the outline profile, which we will just follow the revolve process. Then we will just give the threading at this point. Then we will finish this part. I will just open a new part again with standard millimetric IPT. I'll just go to and clean it. Okay. I will open the origin, have the make the visibility on each side. We have the XY plane with a new line. I will just select, you can just select this point. Oh, let's make it red. This point or this point as origin. I will just select the top point and I will just convert this line with the center line. I will just connect this line like this. Straightness at this point, go inside, go downside, go inside, go downside, and I will just connect and make the trim for unnecessary part. Let's give the dimensions. For inside dimension, we have the 20. For outside dimension, we have the 38. We have the total height from the top side to the bottom side, which is 14.5 millimeters. I will just again reshape this part. But before this, I will just give this point to this line 25.4 to have this line. I will just make this connection to inside and make this one, which we have just stretch to get these points. From the top side, we have this length, which is 6.5, which is this dimension. Also from the bottom side, we have 5.3. We have 1 inch this line to this line. This time I'm not going to be interested in this one. 1 inch. And the next dimension, here it is 32. And we have a stresses at this point, which is again 6.5 from the bottom side. I'm sorry, 1.2 from this point, 1 point. Okay, this part is very small, and we are just going to make the finish. Have the revolve tool. We have only one profile closed loop area here. We will have this one. The missing thing, we have the threaded command, which we have 1 inch with 28 UN to 8. This is the side. We are interested in 5 threads, 1 inch. I'm sorry. We have 1 inch, each stepping thread. I'm sorry. And 5 screws. Save our part file. Part 4. Love that. We will define the materials in the assembly section. We have finished the first page about our mountain. Then we are just going to continue with the next page. We have two parts here. I'm sorry, four parts here. The two are easy. The orange part, the parts with the cold button and hot button. We have part 7 and part 8. We have the nozzle part, and we have the filter and the parts with the orange side. Let's start with the cold and hot button side by using, I will just make the zoom. We have credit, I'm sorry, we have some cut parts here, but the first thing in this part, we will just create this profile from the view here. I will just make, and I will just create this profile. I'm sorry. I will just follow this profile and make the revolve side by using these items. Okay, let's start. Open a new part with standard millimetric IPT. Have the origin side. I will just open the visibility of the origin point and make the visible XY plane. Start a new sketch on XY plane. It is a rounded part, cylindrical part mostly. We will just make the top side first of all. I'll just make this with a line property. I will just choose escape. I will just choose this point as the origin point of our figure or of our part. I'm sorry. I will just convert this line to center line. I'm not going to just include in the section here. I will just convert this line to construction. Right click. Also, I will just make the first line here, and I will just combine another line and make this circle tangent to this line, which I'm going to create with features here. I will just would like to create this curvature, this capside first. I will just make the trims. I also would like to have the bottom side and make this line tangent to this curvature. Make the trims. I will just combine this line to this line and make this line straight and make the trim. This time I'm not going to trim the, if you want you can also trim that line also, but I would like to just keep the axis line, this point on this line and make the trim for unnecessary parts. Now the trim command, the diameter here we have 1.6 and it is 12.9 millimeter far from each side. For this reason, I will just create a new line. I'm not going to use the sketch. I will just convert this one and make this line tangent to this and make this line dimension with 12.9. First thing I'm going to make is make the full sketch, have the revolve tool and select both sides, and with the selecting axis I will just make the top side of it. Next thing I will just use the legs which you have seen at this point. We are going to make these legs, but I will just make one leg and I will just make the copy. This time I have a revolve process. If you want, you can just make a full revolve, then cut the pieces, or you can just make the full half revolve, and you can just make the copies around with the pattern command. It is up to you. Uh, my practical way is just making the full round here, and then make the cuts one by one, or make the cut, copy it around here. You can use the both ways, but I need the sketch of it. Start a new sketch again on XY plane. With F7 tool, I will just see the cross section here. I will just create these two profiles. For this, I get the project geometries. Please open this one. Or you can just make the project cottages. You can also grab the same geometry here. I will just have a line for remove process and make this one center line if you want. From this point, we have an arc shape. From this point, we have an arc shape. And after these two arcs, we just go straight to the center line. I will just create a circle here and make that tangent to this curvature and give the dimension. This time it's radius. Please do not forget to change this one. And the outer side is 2.5 millimeter in radius. Also, we will just go straight to this side, and the whole dimension from the top side will be 6.35. I'll just define that line, 6.35. And after this point, we have a the diameter 1 millimeter curvature at this point. I will just create a new circle. I will define dimension here. Then I will just define the tangency condition. This curvature is tangent to this outside curvature, and this curvature is tangent to the outside direction. Okay. At this point, we have defined our point here. It is moving as you see. Just like this section and this view here, I would like to just keep this section within this line here. It is not amplified, but I can just keep this one. Or you can just think about this curvature. I will just clean it a little bit and trim the unnecessary parts. Also this part and this part. And this part just goes into somewhere in our figures. As you see, it is about to, with the base, it will just insert it into the handle part. And in the handle part, we have just drawn before. Sectional has a dimension of 9.5 millimeters. We can just define that line, which is this one. We can just define this line which has a tangent condition, has a 9.5 millimeter. And I will just make this curvature, just stick to this, and I'm just going to turn this line to construction. I'll just use this offset line here with 0.3 millimeter in offset. I will just make the offset. If I have just select these all line up to this point, but I'm not going to use all the parts here. It is better to select all the parts. Or you can just use this one and make this dimension two items. It is 0.3 millimeter and make the unnecessary part. For this section, we do not have any implementation here, as you see. You can just make the tangent condition around. We do not have any dimension specified, but it is better. Just keep it. I will just use this closed loop area to make the revolve process. Finish this sketch. I will just keep this line, this closed profile. I have the revolve, this feature around this axis line. Then I will just make the cuts from the bottom side. I will just turn to the bottom side and I will just make the cuts. I will just start a new sketch and just only keep the midpoint 30 degrees. I will just trim. You can also just make the project geometry stick to this line like this. You can make point on this line. We can just make the symmetry condition, but we need a line for that symmetry. Just make it function. Define the symmetry condition around the midline and give the dimension from this point to this point, which is 30 millimeters. I will just make this slice up to the back face of this button here. Finish this sketch, add the extrude tool, select this slice, and make the cut up to this point, which is first the cut, then select to, to the back face of the element, which will result a shape something like this. As you see. I have in the paint drawing here, I have one cut here, the second one, the third one, fourth, fifth, and sixth one. I will just make the circular pattern around this line, around the normal axis. I will just have this cut extrusion and select the rotation axis around this point. I will just make the six cuts to have this point. I will just go to again top view. Let's call this button as the part 8, part 7 bit up button or button hot. We will just make a new start sketch for this emboss section with the letter engraved on the top surface of the button here. Start a new sketch on this top side. This time we will just make the text with this. I will just select, and this time I will just make this text selection. I will just use this one. H for hot button. I will just, we have 12 millimeter. I think the 6 millimeter is high. Better. Okay. And I will just adjust this letter side with the escape button. I will just only pull and make this one around like this. You can also adjust with double click. You can also make this one with these two middle alignments. Okay, as you see. This time we have the section here which is aligned almost in the midpoint. We have all the selection. Then we can increase the dimension, let's say 8 millimeter, the text height. Again, the selection for 6 millimeter, a little bit smaller than the size. Finish your sketch. For the engraving, I'm just going to make an extrusion process by using this text. This text has the cut inside. As you see, we have 0.2 millimeters in engraving at this point. I will change the extrusion dimension 0.2 with this one. Also, you can change the color at this point by selecting the surface, then the color from the top side, color wheel, we will just use the red. So keyboard search, you can change the hot button at this point. For cold button, I'm going to make a copy of it. Save, save as. This time I will just change the button 8. This is important. We will just make a new concept at this point. Cold button. Now it is saved with the button code, but the text is different. I will just change the last extrusion, which is the sketch, and I will just change only the letter here. C. Just finish this one. Also, I will just change the color of the surface, which is this in blue color. You can also a little swap if you want so. For this side, we have first created the file here with the, from the hot button. For this, I will just change the name in the eye properties. This is a new section for you. And from the eye properties section in the project group, please, if the material or the name is just selected, okay, no problem, that's all. It is just saved as it is. Save your part file. This is the two button which we have created and copied around one part. This is all for this one. We will just continue with the nozzle and the filter parts and also the o-ring. This time we will continue about with the part 9 nozzle part. It's a very simple part. We only have to draw some outlines here. I will just start a standard millimetric IPT, open the origin, have the center point visible, XY plane visible, start a new sketch on XY plane. For the center axis, which is going to revolve, I will just draw the outline here. Only I will just create at this time, I will just create, I'm sorry, I will just create this profile. I will just follow this profile and I will just add this one as the profile here with the thread feature here. I will just make this extrusion revolve processes. The thickness, it is not specified, but we can just make the hole up to this point. Then we will just create a new hole here. We will just go up to here and I will just make the fillets with 2 millimeters on each side, but we will just make the hole with the simplified thread at this point. Let's start. I will just draw the line here. I'm not going to use this line. I'll just change it to construction line. I'll just go up and I will just create a simple figure closed loop. The height from the bottom side we have 22.5 millimeter, which is this. We have the diameter at this point, which is 20. I will just try to keep this inside, and this time I have 12.5. I have the height here 3.2, and I have, I'm sorry, I will just continue. Here the dimension at this point, which is 11 divided by 16, this time in inches, and I will just finish, make the revolve process, have the fillets. This time it is 2 millimeter from the top side. I will just search the inside feature. For this, I'm just going to change my view to half section view like this to give the thread here. I will just have the half section on XY plane. Again, fillets inside and outside. Have the thread command, which is again unified 16 with 28 UN at this point, but not through all. I will just make an offset with 6.5 millimeter, which is on the other side. Let's just again select the thread command. This is 6.5, but not on this side. We will just make the offset 22.5 if you have a difficulty here, minus 3.2, minus 6.5, minus 6.5 millimeter. We have this track. and I will just save this part with the part 9 node. Hello, again we continue to make the parts. We have three parts left. The two parts are mostly identical. The parts on this page here, we have the O-rings. Also we have a filter part which are made from the wire. We are going to make this filter part from the wire mesh. Let's start with the O-ring parts. I will just open a new metric standard IPT. We have this time we should have to be very careful about this. This the part 5, the O-ring part here. We all the inside diameter of this O-ring part is 17.2 millimeters. The other part 10 filter, it is the outside diameter is 70.2 millimeters. For this, be careful about this one. We will just, I will just say the part file, which 5 with O-ring, start a new sketch. I will just open visibility, XY plane, start sketch on XY plane, have the line here for revolve axis. I will just convert it to center line. I again just create a line for construction purposes. I will just make this one constructed. I will just make another line to give the dimensional constraint about this one. The part 5 O-ring has, I'm just going to zoom in on the paint window. We have 17.2. I will just create the circle here with dimension 3 millimeters. I will make this line tangent to this one, and I will just define the inside. I'm sorry, it was on the other side. I will just make and this and make tangent from the other inside. I will just give this dimension here, which is 18.2. I will just make convert. If you want, you can just convert the construction. Finish your sketch. Have the revolve tool and make the soaring. And save the part file here. For the other part, for part 10, we will just make only change the outside diameter here and the diameter of the O-ring also. I will just save as part 10. I will change the part number again. I will first change. Please observe this, the top side. The part name is all written on this part. Please just look for it. Be careful about this one, or otherwise you will lose your parts here. This time I will just check and delete this part. Tangency, not from this part. I will just move this inside and make the tangent. This time I will just have this line from the outside part here. Finish your sketch. Save the part file with 10. Do not forget to check the eye properties because we will have this name on the technical drawing of the part list part. I will just close this one, save for these two parts. I will just close. A new part I'm just going to open for wire mesh. I will just open a center point visible and XY plane visible. Let's look at the part information, part drawing here. We have a mesh. Uh, the parts are important. These are in wire mesh with the circle wire here. The dimensions between these wires from this point to this point, which is 1.5 millimeter. Again, from this point to this point, again 1.5 millimeter. These are all in sizes, and we can just make the offsets around this one. And the wire dimension is zero point 0.5 millimeter, and we will just make the key feet. Okay, this time we have the straight axes between these. It is 1.5 millimeter. We have 0.25 on this side and 0.25 on this side, which will result as a 2 millimeter between the wire axes. Also the same thing on the other side. The axes between the distance between the axes of the wires are 2 millimeters. Let's create the first wire here. Start sketch. I'll just first make the part here passing through wire dimension. It is zero point 0.5 millimeter. I'll just finish my sketch, make the extrusion symmetrical around. Let's say it is the dimension of this wire is 70.2. Let's say we will just then first make the bigger one, then we will just cut the final dimension afterwards. I'm just going to make, let's say, 20 millimeter in dimension. My first mesh at this point. I will just make the copies by using the directions. But for these directions, I need some information about this one. I forgot to make this one symmetrical around. This is important. Make wire symmetrical first of all. I will just make a rectangular pattern here at this point. But I will like to use the axes, which I'm just going to search from the origin folder, and I will just search for example, the first thing I'm just going to make the wires copied in these sides or on the other side. The direction I can choose here is the x-axis, which is this one. I will just make the, let's say, 10 copies, not too much, and the wire mesh here I have 2 copies. Let's say let's reduce this number with 4. I have the copies. You can also make the symmetrical copy, but you should have to increase quantities here, 2 on the other side, and one itself. You can also make the 7 copies, just make it right. Or you can just make the copies first, then we can just make the circular pattern at that point. Let's create the first two mesh wires. Then we are just going to have this circular pattern with by selecting the Y button here. As you see, we can just create the first mesh from the top side we see. Start a new sketch on XZ plane. To make a cut at this point, I will just use the origin point for cut section, and also I will just use this donut area, this this profile, I'm going to make the cut selection. For this, I need to keep inside, which is 18.2 millimeters, and I will just keep that shape, let's say 50 millimeter in shape. Let's reduce to 10. Your sketch, have the extrude tool. I will just keep the inside feature. I will make the cut first through all in symmetric, through all option. I just want to keep the inside area filter. This is the area which we have here. I'm sorry, I've just made a mistake. I'm not going to make the circular pattern here. I will just make the rectangular pattern. For this reason, I will just omit this part here, to delete, again the delete, or I can just keep it this one, sketch especially. For rectangular pattern, I will just choose this pattern first of all, but I will just keep it on the other side as well. I will just delete and just make a circular this extrusion and just make the copies around the y-axis. I need this. I will just make the rectangular pattern this side. I can use this axis for direction for the copies. 7 at this point. I'm sorry. I will just make the copy extrusion, not the plane. Also for the first, I will just choose the x-axis for direction. I will just like to keep this 7 with on each side. Having these two, then I will just make the cut again by using the exact plane. I will again just create a new sketch on exact plane. I will just keep the not in shape. Let's have the one, the thickness. See some parts here in all directions. I should have to increase with edit feature. I should have to increase the quantity, let's say 9 or 10. Now I have all the parts here, 11, also for the other side, 11. Then make the extrusion tool, cut option, symmetrical through all to keep only the filter inside. You can just close the visibility. Also, you can just select the XY plane copying. Okay. As you see, we have some excess parts. We can increase the do not shape, and with double click, let's say 20 millimeter to keep all the clear inside. And we have the wire mesh. Save your part file, which is the number, and just part 11